Good morning. So you may have noticed that our structure this morning was a little bit different. We started with the Great Invocation and then our meditation. And the reason is that we're putting the Let's Talk at the end of my talk. So more in the form of questions and maybe an answer or two. Okay, so as you're listening to this morning's talk, you may think of a question or two that you'd like to ask here and on the webinar, and that's why I have my iPad up here so I can see any questions that are posted from the webinar. So this morning, I'll be talking about the 7 characteristics of a spiritual person. It's interesting to think about the word spiritual. I know most people just, think of spiritual as spiritual. Other people will translate the word spiritual into religious. And in the esoteric community, these are two very different things, religiosity and spirituality. So today I'm absolutely not talking about religious people. I'm talking about people whose spirit within is awakened and is coming alive and is beginning to recognize the purpose of their life that is more than themselves. So I'll be talking about the 7 characteristics of a spiritual person. I'm also going to be talking a bit about the probationary path, the path of probation, which is not for the weak at heart. But let me begin by saying one last time and most sincerely, Happy New Year. And I'm not going to say it again. Okay, Happy New Year. May 2019 bring us opportunities to be of greater service to one another and to those in need as we travel this most incredible path of life. Most, if not all of us, consider ourselves to be spiritual people. Aspirants or disciples, accepted disciples, accepting disciples, initiates, all on the path of probation. What is probation? And I'm quoting from the teaching. Probation is the period in which you go through tests. It is a very difficult period. You go through physical, emotional, and mental tests. There are physical tensions, difficulties, loads and labors, heavy loads upon your shoulders. And they, capital T, they watch if you can do it. You are all watched. Then you go through emotional tension, then mental tension. For example, they see if you can sit and read a book for 4 hours and meditate half an hour, or take a job and finish it, or if you take a duty and responsibility and see 5,000 obstacles and hindrances on your path because of that duty. They see how you are handling them, because do not forget, the difficulties that we have in this life are peanuts in comparison to the difficulties we are going to have in the astral and mental planes. Their probation is to see how you are handling your body first, the emotions, and then the mind, as well as fears, pressures, and treason against you. How are you handling them? You give a job to yourself, and then you see millions of difficulties on the path. Well, that is where you are going, to prove that you can do things. Also, you are going to show that when you are trapped, you no longer stay trapped. You jump out. Every kind of experience, of experiment that we are going to find on our path of life is nothing else but a text. Either your higher self, is a test. Either your higher self is testing, or your master is testing, or the hierarchy is testing. The more advanced you are, the higher one who is testing you. But it is not actually testing. Testing is the wrong word. It is not that anyone is testing you, but the one who is watching your difficulties, your hindrances, is considering you as you are passing through these tests. Unquote. And that quote is from a book called Building an Ashramic Group. Interesting, right? There's a lot of information in there. What's important, at least to me, an explanation, is don't compare a person who is considered an average person. An average person is one who is not conscious yet, whose soul is not yet awakened, whose spirit is still buried in matter. And consider that that person is on the probationary path, because they are not. And the reason being is that life itself, the tests and trials of life itself, will help that individual to be advanced, or to advance into and onto the path of probation. So as you're listening, perhaps re-listening through the YouTube video, you know, this description of the probationary path, you know, don't make the mistake to think that your little trials and tribulations mean that you're on the probationary path. This probationary path, the tests that are given to you, and that you are then watched, are those who are ready to serve humanity. Those whose karma is in such a minimal way now that these individuals must be tested in a way that they become increasingly refined. Their consciousness becomes more inclusive. They become less and less selfish, less and less self-centered. And so many of these tests are given to probationers and to aspirants and disciples and accepting disciples and accepted disciples and initiates and so forth, to help further their progress on the path in such a way that they can be of greater and greater and greater help to humanity, to all of humanity. So I mentioned the word an accepted disciple. An accepted disciple previously has accepted the existence of hierarchy, karma, reincarnation, and follows the universal spiritual laws. See, we're no longer following the laws of the church, because the laws of the church are basic laws for individuals whose spirit is not yet awakened, and so they need guideposts. They need a guideline to follow in their life to keep them moral and religious, and so forth. Accepted disciples are those who have accepted the laws that are controlling the path of evolution toward the greatest one. Let me ask you this. Are you dedicated to the evolution of your soul and the soul of others? Are you willing to strive and labor for your evolution? Are you willing to work on your character and on self-perfectment? Then it is most likely you're a spiritual person on the path of probation or higher. My suggestion is this: if you want to strengthen your spirituality and make a dedicated commitment to help your soul evolve, commit yourself to become more involved with group activities, your family life, your community life, and it progresses in a gradient way where we start with the family life and then the community life and then the global life. And if you have one, a spiritual, not religious, a spiritual group. If you want to broaden your consciousness, no matter what level of consciousness you find yourself, set a goal for this year to listen to the teachings expressed in classes and lectures and webinars, YouTube videos, or read a few paragraphs from the Agni Yoga books. Attend monthly full moon meditations. Read each issue of Agni Yoga Quarterly and study it, and then make notes from your studies and see how much you can retain from what you have read. Read the monthly Zodiacal newsletter, which can be found on White Mountain's website. Sign up for a meditation course and then follow the instructions. Don't just sign up and then forget about it, which surprisingly enough so frequently happens. The person signs up for a meditation course and insists on, sign me up, I want this course, I want to do it. And that's the last we hear from them. They get lesson 1 and that's it. It's very interesting. And it's so interesting, you can ask yourself a question as to why. Why the resistance? Why, when the soul was pushing you into and inspiring you and causing an impulse in you to say, I really want to engage in a meditation course, and we send out that first lesson and then we don't hear from you again. Why the resistance? See, you're not connected yet to the soul, that higher self that is saying, go for it, do it, this is for your benefit, this is for the benefit of humanity, it's for the benefit of your family, for your community, for the nation, for your spiritual group. The ego is still in control. It's very interesting. If your time will allow, register for our Living Ethics Annual Conference so you can make yourself ready to take full advantage of the energies, the fiery energies that week, and it does require readiness. Readiness means ready. It means that your soul is ready. Then think of service activities you would like to do to help support those groups who are doing the work of hierarchy. Perhaps there's a volunteer committee you would like to join, or perhaps you love the teachings so much that you would like to share them with others in various ways. Maybe there is someone in your group who needs your help, but they're too shy to ask. Or perhaps you could volunteer your time to help clean the center once a week, or work in the meditation garden, or water the many trees that we have at Isvar and the Eastwood Drive Center, or volunteer to make refreshments for the after the service on Sunday. What are your talents? Volunteer your talents to the group. Such actions are reflective of the characteristics of spiritual people. John F. Kennedy said when giving his inaugural address, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." Remember that? We can take that well-known phrase and say, "Ask not what your group can do for you, but what you can do for your group." We have a Russian translation team, a team working on a companion book for Agni Yoga, and a year-long project where people are studying and learning how to protect humanity from cosmic evil, how we can shield humanity from cosmic evil. Be creative. Do something of a spiritual nature, of a service nature, but do it with love. Your service must be done from your heart, not with expectation. So what does this have to do with the characteristics of a spiritual person? You can belong to any religion, church, or group and fulfill your religious duties, but still not be a spiritual person. Spirituality is the practical demonstration of certain characteristics which appear in your life. A spiritual person is a very normal person. They do not need to use artificial makeup to appear spiritual. You see and feel their spirituality through their manners, in their relationships, in their solemnity, and in their simplicity. Their life has no artificiality, but rather a radiation of inner richness. The spiritual person is a very balanced person. They are in harmony with both spiritual and human values, with higher worlds and the worlds of human affairs. They are real. If they say yes, means yes. When you talk to a spiritual person and ask them a question and invite them, let's say, to attend a conference, and they say, yes, I would like to, don't say to a disciple, are you sure? Or if they say no, don't say, are you sure? Did you really think that through? Are you sure that you this and that? A disciple's word, a spiritual person's word, when they say yes means yes and no means no. If they make a commitment, they do not bow out of the commitment. See, if they decide that they want to be part of a meditation course, they don't get lesson 1 and never follow through with their commitments. See, that's a spiritual person. There's something inside us that the teachings call a master, that every single one of us has a master inside of us. And the more the master is in expression, the more committed we are to life as spiritual people. It's very interesting. Someday we'll talk about it. If they make a commitment, they do not bow out of the commitment. They do not try to be someone that they are not. and they are not afraid to express their feelings. They are not afraid to share their truth with others. Of course, in sharing their truth, they do so without imposition. They are not show-offs. They do not give advice unless advice is asked for. And even then, they do not impose their advice on the one in need. They express themselves with loving kindness. They are not aloof, and they are also not sticky with others. They nourish themselves from the earthly life and from the energies of space, and produce their fruits, their creative labor and service. They gathered this is so beautiful. They gathered the honey of experience from life and the ideas and inspirations and impressions from the higher worlds. They live a balanced life between these two worlds. Spirituality is a natural tendency of our human soul to aspire toward perfection and beauty and light. It's like, I was talking to somebody over the last few days about our childhood. In the teachings, Torquem Serdarian, his great teacher, says, someday you're going to come to a point where you're going to give up your teddy bears and let them go. Agni Yoga says, the Agni Yoga teachings say, when you reach the age of 18, your parents are no longer responsible for you unless you have a mental health problem, or other disabilities where you still need parental care. These two ideas of giving up our teddy bears and letting our parents release us at the age of 18 means that we are now taking responsibility for ourselves. That allows that inner master to now begin to speak through us, to bring in the content of the chalice, which is an accumulation of all of our successes and talents through many incarnations. So our parents brought us to the age of 18, and now we are responsible to begin to walk on this path of probation, which requires and puts us under the guidance of this master within and those who are watching us to see, are we going to give up our glamours? Are these glamours going to continue to control us? And illusion and Maya. It's so interesting. So it's not what mom and dad taught us and their idiosyncrasies and their glamours and their illusions and so forth. Their responsibility was to get us to the age of 18, the best that they could, and now they transfer us over to our soul. See that? And from that point, now our human soul can aspire toward perfection and beauty and light. So are we doing this? What did we do this past year to strive toward perfection and beauty and light? What did you do to help your soul to evolve, or others to evolve? Agni Yoga is all about evolution. The writings of Torquem Serdarian are all about evolution. about how we can evolve and broaden our consciousness in this life. But we cannot evolve if we do not aspire toward perfection and beauty and light. We cannot be spiritual without having fruits on our branches. One of our more spiritual fruits would be our talents to serve people, helping them transform their lives and make themselves spiritual. This is what Christ said, by their fruits you will know what they are. Sometimes people in the spiritual community try to show off, making people believe that they are holy, very holy. They show off by fasting or being a vegan or gluten-free, or by trying to do many things for others. See, I don't care if you're vegan. I don't care if you are celiac, whatever that word is. I don't care if you have to eat gluten-free. That's your problem. See, that's your challenge. Don't draw attention to your problems and your challenges and your veganism. We have learned over the years that fasting is a personal effort to improve your health. But fasting and veganism and so forth does not make you spiritual. Serving others also does not make you spiritual if you draw attention to yourself as you engage in that service, or if you force yourself on others, or you tell others all about your good deeds, or by making people dependent on your services. Sacrificial service is serving the needs of others without drawing attention to yourself or for personal gain. When you engage in sacrificial service, you engage in an act in which you forget yourself in the service of another person. A life of sacrificial service is a life that is dedicated to the welfare of all. So here are the 7 characteristics of a spiritual person. First, they demonstrate continuous striving toward perfection. They have an urge to improve all that they do. If your relations at home are in a mess, no matter how many facelifts you have, your ugly spirit will always appear. That is something for us to clearly think about. Dharma. Dharma is the field of action chosen by your higher self. Once you find it, be steady and stable in it. Some people jump like rabbits from one field to another with many logical excuses to justify their lack of perseverance and stability. Whether you are a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, or engineer, that is your dharma. Try to perform your duty in the best way you can without jumping from one dharma to another. You can free yourself from your dharma when you perform it with all your heart and carry it to the state of relative perfection. The next is a spiritual person has a wholehearted dedication to their labor. They don't count the hours and the days. They don't wait till Friday night and the weekend. They don't hold various expectations in their heart. This is something we need to look for in spiritual people. They don't give up when they face their difficulties and tests. Ask yourself, is that person dedicated to that service without counting hours and days, without giving up in front of difficulties. Some people know that they must work 8 hours, but even within that limitation of hours, they still look at their watches. We see them. Or in class, I'll see them looking at the clock. Our classes are only an hour long, and yet they look at the clock. When they look at the clock, they are not concentrating. Imagine a clock looker trying to read a book for 4 hours. As it was talked about, in the beginning of the talk this morning. Labor reaches perfection only when time is forgotten and expectation about the labor no longer exists. Abraham Lincoln, Blavatsky, Helena Rourke, and many other thousands of dedicated souls throughout the centuries carried the torch of labor without expectation and without counting the hours. I shared a little bit of information last Sunday about a man who is a hero, Sir Nicholas Winton, who saved the lives of over 600 children. Do you think he only dedicated an hour a week to that cause? Can you imagine Jesus limiting his work to 5 days weekly? See, I don't. We just laugh at it, or even 6 or 7 hours daily, because that's ridiculous. Or once a week. I must say, to be around such people, dedicated souls, is a joy and inspiration. They are our heroes. To know a hero brings joy into our life. On the path, a spiritual person progresses in spite of difficulties. Difficulties nourish his soul and make him invincible. 3, a spiritual person lives by their conscience in light of the teaching and in the presence of the hierarchy. No one can transform themselves without following the voice of their conscience, without following an exalted teaching, without living in the presence of the hierarchy. The teaching explains that if our conscience is not active, no matter how many Bibles are read over our head, we will remain the same shifty person. The 4th characteristic, the spiritual person has an inclusive and expanding approach to all issues of life. This means that they are broad-minded and tolerant, and that they look at all issues of life from many points of view. This is why we want spiritual people to be the leaders of our nations and our corporations and our families and our groups. A spiritual person can belong to any race, tradition, religion, or ideology, but they have a deep understanding of the race, a deep understanding of the traditions, a deep understanding of religion and the ideologies of others. This is because they do not live as a separated human being, but as a soul who can identify with all human beings. Number 5, a spiritual person carries out all their activities, speech, and thoughts in the sphere of 3 major laws. 3 major laws. The first is the law of cause and effect. The second is the law of reincarnation. And the third is kind of a combination of laws. It's the law of synthesis, attraction, and economy. So it would serve us well to study these laws. As a spiritual person, we realize that our every thought, word, and action will produce a similar thought, word, and action in our life. Because of this, we need to be extremely careful that we do not complicate our life by creating continuous troubles and chaos on our path. Remember that all we are and all that happens to us are the fruits of our thoughts and words and actions. The spiritual person, this is number 6, lives in the realization that they are immortal spiritual beings, charged with the power of unlimited creativity. They are not attached to the changes in life. They are not attached to material values at the expense of higher values. Success and failure do not affect their course of action. Isn't that interesting? Success and failure do not affect their course of action or their dedication to the service of humanity. All great work is done by those who were not and are not attached to their shells. And number 7, the spiritual person is aware that their victory is measured by the joy that they have in their heart. What is the joy that fills the heart of the spiritual person, whether they are in storms or in sunshine, whether they are beaten or victorious, whether they are healthy or sick? That joy springs from the memories in their heart that they did their best to serve, to uplift, to transform, and encourage other pilgrims on the path. A spiritual person has a deep well of memories of service, sacrifice, dedication, love, and protection of those who are attacked. And they bring out of this well the joyful memories to enlighten their path every time they tread through those dark nights. So let me close with 4 more points. A spiritual person is a normal and up-to-date person. Normal and up-to-date. Up-to-date is very important to think about. If you still don't know the computer, shame on you. That means you're not up to date. If you are not on Facebook, shame on you. It means you're not up to date. You say, oh, I can't be on Facebook because of this and this and that and that. Then usually it's because you're afraid that you're going to be hacked. Well, I was just hacked. And I'm still on Facebook. Because this is where the people are. Messengers, social media. You can't sit in your home and say, I am an accepted disciple, and isolate yourself from humanity. You can't continue using your IBM typewriter and say you're up to date. Their spirituality is not artificial, and they do not need to advertise it. Their spirituality is known to others by the way they live and create and relate to life in general. A spiritual person is a fighter. They stand up and risk their life for the truth. They risk their life to protect the innocent. They fight against the spreading dangers of drugs and prostitution and crime, as well as the misuse of discoveries of science and technology. However, their fight is not to gain personal advantage or votes of popularity. Watch your politicians, particularly in the United States, where they're now gathering to decide who's going to run for the next election of the President of the United States. Watch the fighters. It is a fight. They fight for the common good. A spiritual person opposes things such as drug dealers and prostitutes and hypocrites, those who exploit, those who work for organized crime. But in the meantime, they try to gain their souls and defeat the weaknesses of their personalities. And finally, a spiritual person stands against darkness and tries to dispel it with their light. A spiritual person is always enlightened by the light of compassion without losing their measures of righteousness. So we have a couple of minutes for questions, and then we'll close. Okay, I see problems with sound and so forth. I can't help you with that. Okay. Any questions, Terry?
How can a spiritual person stay aligned with the inner guidance when faced with distractions and attacks?
How can a spiritual person stay aligned with inner guidance when they are distracted and have attacks? That's the time you really need to stay aligned. It is, in comparison, by going back to this first quote about, can we sit and read a book for 4 hours or meditate for a half an hour? Yes, if we're aligned. Attacks are to be expected if you are a spiritual person, if you are serving humanity, if you are a servant of hierarchy, if you are being impressed by the master. That voice is louder than any distraction, is more powerful than any attack. The distractions will not even be recognized because you are so aligned with your purpose. Any other questions?
How do we stay compassionate with people who commit treason against us?
It depends on whether we're identified with the individual's soul or personality. When people commit treason against us, or they attack us, or they talk about us behind our back, or they malign us, or they make fun of us and belittle us, and so on and so forth, we know it's their personality talking. So our identification, if we want to use that word, needs to be with the soul of that individual. You know, it's not easy, but and it doesn't mean that we don't react, at least briefly. But we can have forgiveness for anything and anybody that attacks us, that hurts us, that maligns us in serious ways, if we focus on the light of their soul, which most likely is going to be quite dim. But we can have compassion for that soul, that spirit, no matter what. Doesn't mean we have to like what they've done to us, but we can have compassion. Okay, let me just say one thing, because this question is so good. The question is sharing the truth with others without imposition. How is this done? Without attachment to the truth. You give the truth, you speak the truth, and then you shut your mouth.